Picture this: a young man in 1920s America, carrying his sample case from door to door, selling anything he could to make ends meet. Joel Goldsmith seemed destined for an ordinary life of struggle and limitation. But within this traveling salesman lived a soul yearning for something greater than material success. One fateful evening, exhausted from another day of rejections, Joel collapsed in his hotel room. In that moment of complete surrender, something extraordinary happened. A presence filled the room, and he heard words that would change everything. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." This was no ordinary religious experience. That night marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable spiritual transformations in modern history. The struggling salesman would become a mystic healer, touching millions of lives worldwide. But his journey from limitation to liberation holds secrets that can transform your life too. Joel discovered that this mystical awakening wasn't reserved for the chosen few. Within every human being lies the same divine presence that visited him that night. The question isn't whether you're worthy of transformation, but whether you're ready to recognize the infinite power already dwelling within you. After his mystical awakening, Joel didn't immediately abandon his sales career. Instead, something remarkable happened in his daily work. Clients began responding to him differently. Deals that seemed impossible suddenly materialized. His genuine care for people's needs, now rooted in spiritual awareness, created unexpected success. This wasn't positive thinking or sales technique. Joel had tapped into what he called the secret place of the Most High. When we operate from this consciousness, our human efforts become channels for divine activity. Problems solve themselves. Opportunities appear from nowhere. People are drawn to our authentic presence. Joel realized that every challenge in his life had been preparing him for this awakening. The rejections taught him humility. The struggles developed his compassion. The failures showed him that human will alone was insufficient. Now surrendered to divine guidance, he experienced effortless achievement. You too carry this same divine potential. Every difficulty you've faced has been developing your spiritual muscles. Your struggles haven't been punishments, but preparations for your own mystical awakening. The divine presence that transformed Joel's life is waiting to transform yours. As Joel's consciousness expanded, he discovered he could sense people's unspoken needs. Walking into a prospect's office, he would intuitively know exactly what they required. This wasn't mind reading, but something far more profound. He was learning to listen to the divine intelligence that knows all things. One morning, while preparing for an important sales call, Joel heard an inner voice clearly say, "Don't go." Instead of his planned appointment, he felt guided to visit a different client entirely. That unexpected visit resulted in the largest order of his career. This became his new way of living, guided by inner wisdom rather than human planning. Joel called this practicing the presence of God in daily affairs. He learned that divine intelligence operates through us when we become still enough to listen. Our human mind sees limitations and obstacles. Divine mind sees opportunities and solutions we could never imagine on our own. This same divine guidance is available to you right now. In your next decision, instead of immediately analyzing with your human mind, pause. Become still. Ask for guidance. Then listen with your heart. You'll be amazed at the wisdom that flows through you when you learn to trust this inner voice. The turning point in Joel's transformation came when he realized that God wasn't someone to petition or bargain with, but the very essence of his own being. This wasn't blasphemy, but the deepest spiritual truth. The kingdom of heaven isn't a distant place, but a state of consciousness available right here, right now. Joel stopped praying for things and started praying from the recognition of what already was. Instead of asking God to heal him, he realized that in divine consciousness there was nothing to heal. Instead of seeking abundance, he recognized that infinite supply was his spiritual birthright, always present and available. This shift from seeking to recognizing changed everything. His sales work became a form of service. His interactions with people became opportunities to share divine love. His entire life became a living prayer, a continuous communion with the infinite presence within him. You don't need to wait for a dramatic mystical experience. This same recognition is available to you right now. You are not a human being seeking God. You are a divine being temporarily wearing a human form, remembering your true nature. Word of Joel's remarkable transformation began spreading throughout his community. Colleagues noticed his newfound peace and success. Clients felt something different in his presence. People began asking, "What happened to you, Joel? There's something special about the way you conduct business now." At first, Joel hesitated to share his mystical experiences. Who would believe that a traveling salesman had encountered the divine presence? But as more people asked, he realized his transformation wasn't meant to be hidden. He began sharing his story in small gatherings, teaching others the principles he'd discovered. One woman attended Joel's first informal teaching session, suffering from chronic pain that doctors couldn't cure. As Joel explained how divine love dissolves all human problems, she felt something shift within her. The pain that had tormented her for years simply vanished. She had experienced spiritual healing through understanding. This healing wasn't unique to Joel's presence. It happened because the woman recognized the truth of her own divine nature. Joel had simply reminded her of what she already was. This became the foundation of his healing work, not doing something to people, but awakening them to their own spiritual completeness. As Joel continued sharing his discoveries, more remarkable healings occurred. A businessman struggling with bankruptcy found sudden financial opportunities after understanding his true spiritual supply. A mother watched her troubled teenager transform as she learned to see him through the eyes of divine love rather than human judgment. These weren't miracles in the traditional sense. They were natural results of consciousness change. When people stopped identifying with their problems and started identifying with their divine nature, their external circumstances reflected this inner transformation. Joel was teaching people to live from their spiritual identity rather than their human limitations. The most profound healing Joel witnessed was in a man who had been consumed by anger and resentment for years. As this man learned to see others as divine beings, temporarily forgetting their true nature, his heart opened. The hatred that had poisoned his life dissolved into compassion and understanding. Joel realized he wasn't healing anyone. He was simply holding up a mirror, reflecting back to people their own divine perfection. Every healing was actually a self-recognition. Every transformation was someone remembering who they really were beneath their human conditioning and beliefs. Joel's reputation as a spiritual teacher began attracting seekers from across the country. People traveled hundreds of miles to attend his talks and experience the healing atmosphere he created. But Joel never claimed special powers. He insisted that what happened through him was available through anyone willing to recognize their divine nature. During one memorable evening session, a woman wheelchair-bound for 15 years attended Joel's talk. As he spoke about the truth of perfect spiritual being, something clicked in her consciousness. She suddenly stood up and walked to the front of the room, her healing complete and instantaneous. The audience was amazed, but Joel wasn't surprised. He had learned that in divine consciousness, there are no incurable conditions, no hopeless situations, no limitations that divine love cannot dissolve. The woman's healing wasn't a violation of natural law, but the operation of a higher law most people don't understand. What made Joel's work unique was his insistence that these healings weren't dependent on his presence or power. He taught people to develop their own spiritual consciousness, to have their own direct relationship with the divine presence within them. His goal was never to create dependence, but to awaken independence. Joel discovered that his most powerful healing work happened not through dramatic interventions, but through quiet recognition of spiritual truth. He would sit with someone in difficulty, not trying to fix their problem, but resting in the awareness that in divine reality, the problem didn't exist. This consciousness of truth had transforming power. One man came to Joel convinced he was dying of an incurable disease. Instead of addressing the disease directly, Joel held him in the light of his perfect spiritual identity. As the man began to see himself as divine consciousness rather than a sick body, his healing unfolded naturally over several weeks. Joel learned that most human problems persist because we fight them with human solutions. But when we address them from divine consciousness, recognizing that perfect spiritual being is our true nature, the problems lose their reality and power over us. This became his central teaching. Consciousness change creates life change. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, Subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? As Joel's understanding deepened, he developed what he called the practice of the presence. This wasn't complicated meditation or religious ritual, but a simple awareness of divine presence in every moment. While conducting business, he would pause and acknowledge, "I and the Father are one." This recognition transformed ordinary activities into sacred communion. Joel taught that we don't need to set aside special times to be spiritual. Every conversation, every business transaction, every daily task can become an opportunity to practice divine consciousness. When we remember our true identity as spiritual beings, even mundane activities become infused with sacred purpose and meaning. He showed people how to carry this awareness into their work, relationships, and challenges. A secretary learned to approach her demanding boss from this consciousness of divine love, and their entire working relationship transformed. A father struggling with his rebellious teenager began seeing the divine nature beneath his son's behavior. The key wasn't changing external circumstances first, but changing the consciousness with which we meet them. From human consciousness, problems seem overwhelming. From divine consciousness, we see through appearances to the spiritual reality that remains perfect, harmonious, and whole beneath surface appearances. Joel's business continued flourishing, but now with a different purpose. Instead of selling products primarily for profit, he saw his work as opportunities to serve and bless others. Customers sensed this shift and responded with trust and loyalty. His success became a demonstration that spiritual principles work practically in material affairs. He developed a unique approach to business challenges. When facing difficult negotiations, he would first go within and recognize the divine nature of everyone involved. This consciousness of universal good attracted solutions that benefited all parties. Competition dissolved into collaboration. Problems revealed themselves as opportunities for creative solutions. One particularly challenging contract negotiation seemed headed for failure until Joel applied this principle. Instead of fighting for his position, he held all parties in divine love and asked for guidance that would serve everyone's highest good. The resulting agreement exceeded everyone's expectations and led to long-term partnerships. Joel proved that spiritual consciousness doesn't make us impractical dreamers, but more effective in worldly affairs. When we operate from divine wisdom rather than human cleverness, we tap into intelligence and resources beyond our personal limitations. This is mystical practicality at its finest. Joel discovered that forgiveness was one of the most powerful healing forces available to humanity. But his understanding of forgiveness went far beyond conventional religious teaching. True forgiveness wasn't pardoning someone's bad behavior, but recognizing that divine beings cannot actually harm or be harmed. All human discord is temporary forgetfulness of our spiritual nature. When someone treated Joel unfairly in business, instead of harboring resentment, he would see through their human behavior to their divine essence. This didn't excuse their actions, but it freed him from carrying the poison of anger. Often, his loving perception actually helped the other person remember their better nature. Joel taught a businessman whose partner had cheated him to practice this deeper forgiveness. At first resistant, the man gradually learned to see his former partner as a divine being temporarily lost in material consciousness. This shift not only freed him from bitterness, but opened the way for unexpected financial recovery. This practice of true forgiveness became one of Joel's most transformative teachings. He showed people that we don't forgive others for their sake, but for our own freedom. When we hold anyone in unforgiveness, we chain ourselves to their human failures instead of soaring in divine love. As Joel's teaching ministry expanded, he attracted students from around the world. But he noticed that many came seeking healing of specific problems rather than understanding the principles behind healing. He began emphasizing that lasting transformation requires consciousness change, not just temporary relief from symptoms. Joel developed a systematic approach to spiritual development. He taught people to begin each day with recognition of their divine identity, to pause throughout the day for moments of spiritual awareness, and to end each day in gratitude for divine guidance received. This wasn't ritual, but practical consciousness training. He showed students how to apply spiritual principles to every area of life. A woman learned to transform her troubled marriage not by changing her husband, but by consistently seeing him as a divine being worthy of love. A businessman discovered that recognizing divine intelligence as his source led to innovative solutions. The key insight Joel shared was that spiritual principles work universally. The same consciousness that heals physical problems can solve financial difficulties, relationship challenges, and career obstacles. Divine law operates in every area of human experience when we learn to align our thinking with spiritual truth. Joel encountered his first major teaching challenge when a prominent religious leader accused him of promoting dangerous mystical ideas. Traditional Christianity, the critic argued, required faith in external authority, not claims of inner divinity. Joel faced a choice: compromise his teachings or stand firm in his mystical understanding. Drawing on his business experience in handling difficult clients, Joel responded with love rather than defensiveness. He explained that his teachings didn't contradict Christianity, but revealed its mystical depth. Christ's statement, "I and the Father are one," wasn't unique to Jesus, but the truth of every human being's spiritual identity. This controversy actually strengthened Joel's work. People hungering for deeper spiritual truth were drawn to his non-dogmatic approach. He showed them that mystical Christianity wasn't about joining another religion, but awakening to the divine presence already within them. His classes grew larger despite, or perhaps because of, the criticism. Joel learned that authentic spiritual teaching often challenges conventional religious thinking. The mystic's role isn't to comfort people in their limitations, but to awaken them to their unlimited spiritual nature. This requires courage to speak truth even when it disturbs traditional beliefs. One of Joel's students faced a crisis that tested everything he'd been teaching. The man's young daughter became seriously ill, and doctors offered little hope. He came to Joel desperate, begging for healing prayers. Joel's response surprised him. "I won't pray for your daughter's healing. Instead, I'll recognize the truth that she has never been sick." This wasn't callousness, but Joel's deepest understanding. In spiritual reality, divine beings cannot be diseased or damaged. The daughter's perfect spiritual identity remained intact regardless of physical appearances. Joel held this truth while the father struggled to accept such a radical perspective. Over the following days, as the father gradually stopped seeing his daughter as a sick child and began recognizing her spiritual perfection, her condition improved dramatically. The healing wasn't magical, but the natural result of consciousness aligned with spiritual truth rather than material appearances. This experience taught Joel to help people look beyond human problems to spiritual reality. Our human sympathy, while well-intentioned, often reinforces the very conditions we want to heal. True compassion sees through appearances to the divine perfection that remains unchanged by human circumstances. Joel's most difficult period came when his own faith was tested. Despite years of spiritual development, he faced a series of personal challenges that seemed to contradict everything he taught. His business encountered serious problems, his health wavered, and doubts crept into his consciousness. During this dark night of the soul, Joel discovered the difference between intellectual understanding and embodied realization. He had been teaching spiritual principles without fully living them. His challenges weren't punishment, but opportunities to deepen his consciousness beyond mere mental concepts to living experience. Instead of abandoning his spiritual path, Joel used this difficult period to surrender more completely to divine guidance. He stopped trying to manage his life through human will and allowed divine intelligence to work through him more fully. This surrender paradoxically gave him greater strength and effectiveness. When Joel emerged from this challenging period, his teaching carried new depth and authenticity. Students could sense that he had walked through the valley and emerged with genuine wisdom. His struggles had refined his understanding and made his ministry more powerful and credible. Joel developed a simple but profound technique he called the pause. Whenever facing any challenge, decision, or interaction, he would pause and silently acknowledge, "God is present here." This brief recognition shifted his consciousness from human limitation to divine possibility. Small problems dissolved and larger ones revealed unexpected solutions. He taught this technique to a woman struggling with financial difficulties. Every time worry about money arose, she would pause and recognize divine abundance as her true source. Instead of frantically seeking human solutions, she became receptive to guidance and opportunities she previously wouldn't have noticed. The pause technique worked because it interrupted the stream of human thinking that perpetuates problems. In that moment of recognition, divine intelligence could flow through human consciousness. What seemed impossible from human perspective became possible when approached from divine awareness. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? As Joel's reputation spread internationally, he received an invitation to teach in Europe. This marked a new phase of his ministry, sharing mystical Christianity with diverse cultural backgrounds. He discovered that divine truth transcends religious and cultural boundaries. The same principles that worked in America transformed lives in England, Germany, and beyond. In London, Joel encountered sophisticated intellectuals who challenged his teachings with philosophical arguments. Instead of debating, he demonstrated spiritual principles through the healing consciousness he carried. Chronic conditions dissolved, financial problems resolved, and relationships healed as people experienced truth rather than merely discussing it. Joel realized that the power of his ministry wasn't in his words but in his consciousness. When he held audiences in divine love, speaking from genuine realization rather than intellectual concepts, transformation occurred naturally. People felt the presence of divine reality and were awakened to their own spiritual nature. This international phase taught Joel that mystical consciousness is humanity's universal heritage. Regardless of background, education, or religious training, people recognize divine truth when they encounter it authentically expressed. The mystic speaks the language of the soul that all humans understand intuitively. Joel's European students included several physicians who initially approached his work with skepticism. Dr. Elisabeth Müller, a prominent German doctor, attended his lectures to debunk what she considered religious superstition. Instead, she witnessed healings that challenged her materialistic worldview and medical training. After months of observation and study, Dr. Müller became one of Joel's most devoted students. She began incorporating spiritual principles into her medical practice, not replacing medicine but adding the dimension of consciousness healing. Her patients' recovery rates improved dramatically as she learned to see beyond physical symptoms to spiritual wholeness. This integration of mystical understanding with professional expertise became a hallmark of Joel's mature teaching. He attracted lawyers who brought divine wisdom into legal practice, teachers who recognized the divine nature of their students, and business leaders who operated from spiritual principles rather than mere profit motives. Joel proved that mystical consciousness enhances rather than contradicts practical effectiveness. When professionals operate from divine awareness, their work becomes more successful, fulfilling, and beneficial to others. Spiritual realization doesn't make us otherworldly, but more skillful in this world. During his travels, Joel encountered various mystical traditions and discovered universal principles underlying all authentic spiritual paths. Whether Christian mystics, Jewish Kabbalists, or Eastern sages, those who achieved genuine realization taught similar truths. Divine presence within, consciousness creates experience, love dissolves all problems. This broad exposure refined Joel's understanding and made his teaching more inclusive. He could speak to people from different religious backgrounds without requiring them to abandon their traditions. Instead, he showed them the mystical depth within their own faith, awakening them to direct experience of divine presence. In India, Joel met a Hindu sage who told him, "You teach what our ancient scriptures proclaim, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. You are not teaching Western religion, but universal truth." This confirmation from Eastern wisdom validated Joel's mystical understanding and encouraged him to continue sharing regardless of religious criticism. Joel returned to America with expanded vision. He had seen that divine consciousness transcends all human categories and divisions. The mystic's role is to awaken people to their universal spiritual heritage, regardless of the particular religious language or cultural forms through which this awakening occurs. Back in America, Joel faced his greatest challenge yet. A former student, feeling betrayed by his own unrealistic expectations of instant transformation, began publicly attacking Joel's character and teachings. This crisis forced Joel to examine his motives and methods more deeply than ever before. Instead of defending himself or counterattacking, Joel used this difficult period to surrender more completely to divine will. He realized that his reputation, success, and even his ministry belonged to God, not to his human ego. This surrender freed him from the need to prove anything or protect his image. The attacks actually purified Joel's work by driving away those seeking miracles without understanding and attracting sincere students, hungry for authentic spiritual development. His classes became smaller but more committed. The quality of consciousness and transformation deepened as quantity decreased. This trial taught Joel that the spiritual path includes periods of testing that refine our understanding and commitment. External attacks often reflect internal spiritual development, clearing away human attachments that limit divine expression through us. Every challenge becomes opportunity for greater surrender and deeper realization. In his mature years, Joel developed what became his most profound teaching, the art of spiritual listening. Beyond techniques and practices, he discovered that consciousness attuned to divine presence receives continuous guidance, healing power, and wisdom. This listening wasn't passive waiting, but active receptivity to divine activity. Joel taught students to begin each day with this spiritual listening, becoming receptive to divine guidance before engaging in human activities. Decisions made from this consciousness proved consistently wise. Problems addressed from this awareness found solutions that human planning couldn't devise. Relationships approached through divine listening became channels for mutual blessing. A businessman learned this spiritual listening and discovered that deals closed more smoothly, partnerships formed more harmoniously, and challenges resolved more creatively when he operated from this receptive consciousness. His success became a demonstration of divine intelligence working through human affairs. Joel showed that spiritual listening transforms ordinary people into mystics. We don't need special psychic abilities or religious training. When we become genuinely receptive to divine presence, wisdom flows through us naturally. This is the secret of effective living, letting divine intelligence guide human activity. Joel's final years were marked by extraordinary fruitfulness. His books reached millions worldwide, his students established healing centers internationally, and his principles influenced countless lives. Yet he remained humble, always pointing people beyond his human personality to the divine presence he had learned to embody. When asked about his greatest discovery, Joel always returned to the same truth. Recognizing God as the reality of individual being transforms everything. This wasn't theological doctrine but living experience. When people truly understand their divine nature, human limitations dissolve and infinite possibilities emerge naturally. His last public appearance demonstrated this truth powerfully. Though physically frail, Joel's consciousness radiated such divine love that the entire audience felt transformed. Healings occurred throughout the room, not through his human effort but through the divine presence he had learned to let flow through him. Joel's legacy wasn't his organization or teachings, but the countless individuals awakened to their own spiritual nature. Each person who recognized their divine identity became a light in the world, demonstrating that the transformation he experienced is available to everyone willing to surrender human limitation for divine realization. Joel's transition from human form to spiritual freedom came peacefully, surrounded by students who had become family through shared spiritual understanding. His last words were characteristic. "Remember, you are the light of the world. Let it shine." He had completed his earthly mission of awakening humanity to its divine heritage. The principles Joel discovered continue transforming lives decades after his passing. Students around the world practice spiritual listening, recognize divine presence in daily activities, and demonstrate that mystical consciousness produces practical results. His teachings remain as relevant today as when first given. What made Joel's life extraordinary wasn't supernatural powers, but his willingness to recognize and live from his divine nature. The traveling salesman who became a mystic proved that spiritual transformation is possible for anyone willing to surrender human limitations and embrace their spiritual inheritance. Joel's story reminds us that we too carry infinite possibilities within our consciousness. The same divine presence that transformed his life awaits our recognition. Every challenge we face is opportunity to deepen our spiritual understanding. Every day offers chances to practice living from divine consciousness. Today, as you hear Joel's story, you're being called to your own spiritual awakening. The divine presence that visited a struggling salesman in a hotel room is present with you right now. You don't need to wait for dramatic mystical experiences. Recognition of your spiritual nature can begin this very moment. Joel's transformation from limitation to liberation reveals the path available to every human being. Within your consciousness lies the same infinite power that dissolved his problems, guided his decisions, and made his life a blessing to countless others. This power awaits your recognition and cooperation. The traveling salesman's journey to mystical realization proves that spiritual awakening isn't reserved for religious professionals or specially chosen individuals. It's the birthright of every person willing to look beyond human appearances to divine reality. Your transformation can begin wherever you are, whatever your circumstances. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.